Hey, welcome to Afterthoughts. I'm Greg.
I'm Taylor.
So we are excited. I don't even know what episode this is, but we're
It's
we're
11.
in it.
We're on 11. Yeah.
Okay, we're in episode. We're in it to win it
Yeah,
on
that's
this
it.
deal.
Yep.
Yeah. So this is Taylor Robertson. Taylor's been on our staff team since October, and he oversees our communications. So anything social media related, the things, the potty press, newsletter, just all things communication run through Taylor. And so doing a fantastic job.
Thank you.
But it did occur to me that you've popped up a few times on Sunday mornings at the end of the service, and you've said, "I'm one of the pastors here," and people are like, "Wait,
Who? That's right,
yeah. So this is Taylor. He's usually behind the camera.
Yeah, that's right.
And Sam's out today, and so Taylor's going to jump in and join us for the conversation. So I appreciate it, man.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Yeah. So we're walking through Matthew 17 into the chapter 24 through 27. I joked yesterday that Sam got the cool passage the week before.
Yep.
And even didn't really land on what would have been the most obvious.
That's right.
Faith of a mustard seed, moving mountains.
The sermon that we've heard hundreds of times if we grew up in church. Yeah.
Again, super fresh take, loved it. But I got to talk about the coin in the fish's mouth.
That's right.
And of course, upon reading it last week, my first read was like, what?
Yeah.
I gotta figure out what this is all about, but it was a fascinating passage once I jumped into it, and so I'm gonna kind of shift over and let you moderate our conversation. And you've got some questions and some ideas that I think will be good for us to
I think there's
talk
some questions that'll kind of help prompt some curiosity maybe for the people who are watching. Yesterday I got in a conversation kind of mid-second service with somebody who was there for the first service, and we got kind of in this discussion of, obviously we're talking about the temple tax here in Matthew 17, but the idea, or I should say the question between the difference of a temple tax and a tithe. So being that came up in that conversation, I was like, well, I wonder if there's other people that are maybe questioning the same thing, right? So take a second and expand on what those things are and why they differ, and maybe how they function differently.
Right. Well, that's kind of loaded because I don't know that I have a firm answer on it other than this temple tax was an annual event. So it happened once a year, and every Jew was supposed to give this once a year offering, and it was for temple upkeep.
Okay.
So the tithe would have been a regular 10% off the top, which when people talk to me about tithing today, and one of their big arguments is that tithing is, hey, tithing is only an Old Testament concept.
Right.
And I'm like, right. And Jesus told the rich young ruler to give everything he had, sell it all, give it to the poor. So biblical giving in the New Testament is somewhere between 10% and everything you've got.
You choose, I guess, right?
Yeah. Do you want a gross blessing or a net blessing?
Yeah, that's
you
right.
get to decide. But when I think about, actually, when I first read the passage this week, I wondered, okay, so is this really a message on giving? And it really wasn't. It wasn't the point. The point was he was using this idea of a temple tax to really expound on something bigger that he was specifically wanting to talk to Peter about. And again, I mentioned yesterday, it was really peculiar that that Peter seems to be in Matthew's crosshairs because he's talked about a lot, more in Matthew than I think in the other Gospels.
Yeah.
John refers to him, but usually he's the butt of John's jokes.
Right, yeah.
Because John was the one that Jesus loved, self-proclaimed.
Yeah, that's right.
And so, it's really funny to see how John handles Peter running to the tomb.
Yep.
That John got there first.
That's right.
I won. Tag. Yeah, so
there wasn't any competitiveness between any of them.
Yeah, so I would say, in short, and there's probably more to say about it, but I don't think it's the point of the passage that, if we were to bring that into modern day, how do we, when we talk about, tithing in the American church today, how much of that is for temple upkeep, to take care of building, take care of admin, which would be staff, versus how much is going, into the community. And so At Restoration, I would say just under 50% of our giving, of our budget goes to staffing, which is about the national average, about 50%. And then, of course, we have a building that we've just built. There's a fair amount that's going to the day-to-day operations, paying the bills to keep the lights on, as well as debt reduction. And then we've got a percentage, I think it's around 10%, that's going outside the walls to our 12 partner ministries, to benevolence, to all of those kinds of things. And we'd love to see that grow. And so I think as our debt goes down, our level of giving outside the walls will go up. So,
well, it was cool because this morning when we talk about that 10%, it would be easy to see that as just 10% is going outside the walls somewhere, right? But this morning it was interesting because we got talking about how yesterday, this month is our spotlight is, the Champion Project, and how yesterday and actually once a month, Champion Project brings them here for worship. And so to see that outside the walls kind of investment per se is now kind of almost returning a dividend, if you will, on Sunday mornings, and the Lord is working in their lives here. And I mean, it's super cool. Like, it's not just money outgoing, like the Lord is using and honoring it, and these kids, they're coming to know Jesus. Their lives are being impacted forever. So that's pretty cool.
I mean, if you were at second service yesterday, all of the Champion Project girls, I think there were 10 of them, 10 or 12, they were all up at the front. And they stayed around afterwards and had lunch, and I had the opportunity to go in and talk to them for a bit. But I mentioned to our staff that outside the walls is coming inside the walls. And that means that we're having an impact.
That's right.
We're not just throwing money at something. We're actually being able to, life on life, see the gospel going forward.
Well, it's the faith becoming reality, becoming personal, and that's something else that you kind of talked about, this weekend in your message, was this idea of turning from race to relationship. Tell us more about that. Like, for maybe somebody who wasn't there yesterday and they're hearing this phrase for the first time, race to relationship. What does that mean?
Well, so when I was saying race to relationship, I was like Jewish by race versus relationship with Jesus. So race to relationship, it was good alliteration. But when we think about it, and I made this point yesterday, you can grow up in a Christian family and exist in the religion of Christianity. Do all the Christian things, go to a Christian church, sing all the Christian songs, maybe serve in Christian ministry. You can do all those things, and you can miss Jesus in the process. Because it's not about what you do, it's about who you receive. And so moving from just, hey, my parents are Christians, so I'm a Christian. Well, no, because each of your parents has a relationship with Jesus, an opportunity for a relationship with Jesus. You have an opportunity for a relationship with Jesus. But that's what I meant. So you had an entire race of people that were known as God's chosen people. And so in their mind, they were already living from a place of privilege. That we are the ones chosen by God. We are descendants of Abraham. We are carriers of covenant blessing. And now Jesus was coming and challenging that. Actually, it's not about your mom and dad. That I am coming with a new covenant to complete the covenant that was made. I am the completion of the covenant.
That's right.
And so that's where it gets really interesting, that the reason that Jesus is constantly reinterpreting the law, he's not abolishing it, he's reinterpreting it for them, because now he's being custom fit into this whole idea of this covenantal blessing.
It's kind of the difference between when we were in New York, they used this word rend, and I had never really paid much attention to that word. I had heard it before, never really knew how to define it. And so this idea of rend, R-E-N-D, meaning to tear apart, like to put into two. And I even said that in the benediction yesterday. It was like, God, we are here to rend our hearts to you. We're tearing it apart and inviting and welcoming you into our hearts. Over the last, 6-7 months that I've been here, that's something I was sharing with our small group just the other day. Like, I had I've been in ministry for 13, 14 years, something like that. Interned before that. So like, I've seen a lot of church work, right? But over the last 6 or 7 months, what the Lord has shown me is that I had submitted my life to him in salvation, and even in service, if you will. But I had not rendered my heart, I had only rented my ministry. So, like, in other words, what I'm saying is like, I was like, okay, God, I know you want to use me, so here's my gifts, here's my skills. And then this past first Wednesday, the Lord spoke this over my life, and he was like, hey, listen, you figured it out now. Like, it's not just about rending an inheritance or rending a task or rending a ministry or rendering things that need to be done. Though that's great, but it's your heart that I'm after.
Mm.
And so when you said that yesterday, I was like, man, that hits home for me, because I don't doubt my salvation over the last, however many years, decades. Uh, but at the same time, I'm also recognizing in my life this fall point that I had rendered my action. I grew up in a Christian home, so it's like, oh man, like I've got this thing, like I've got it's sealed deal, And I accepted Jesus at the age of 7, called him ministry, several years later. But I never rendered my heart fully. I rendered and tore apart my action and what I thought God had skilled me and gifted me to do. But now he's like, hey, listen, there's more. Like, it's your heart. Just open it up and let me in. And I think that's what he's saying here. He's like, hey, listen, it doesn't come from anywhere. I mean, the book of John's very clear. I am the way, the truth, and the life. Like, it's through me and me alone, right? And that's kind of what he's saying here is like, hey, it's not inherited. Like, this is a personal thing. And so race to relationship, it's faith becoming personal.
Right. And so, we get that from the question that he asked Peter.
Yeah.
When he says in verse 25, what do you think? From whom do the kings of the earth collect duty and taxes? From their own children or from others? And he's saying, hey, listen, if you're a king and you're in the royal family, you don't pay taxes. It's the commoners, it's the subjects of the kingdom.
That's right.
That pay the taxes. And I found it really interesting. So just parenthetically, this morning someone was asking about, when you read a passage like this, it may not be obvious to you what he's saying. Yeah. And so you could read it and just go, oh, that's weird. There's a coin in the mouth of a fish. Yeah. But how do you get to the deeper meaning? And really, it comes through commentary, through deeper study. I mean, I'm a guy, and I'm not a scholar, and so I'm reading scholars to really get to the deeper meaning. But one of the Bible study tools that I learned to use is to ask questions. And so I set a timer. This is from Ben Stewart, who he used to pastor Breakaway. Now he's Passion City, D.C.
Okay.
And phenomenal dude. But I heard him speak on Bible study in preparation. And so he said, set a timer. So set it for 30 minutes, 45 minutes, whatever is the right time for you. And then read the passage and ask as many questions as you can. And so for me, I did this week on this passage. And, my pad's not working. I think it's 33 questions. I came up with 33 questions over these 4 verses. And so what it did for me was made me inquisitive. Yeah. And I'm asking a lot of questions because I'm having to reread and reread and reread and reread and really search for the deeper meaning. And I'm asking questions, and I don't know all the answers to all those questions, but it gave me a grid to where I wanted to search.
That's good.
Where were the most interesting places for me in my heart? And hopefully I'm kind of representing a bigger population that if it's interesting to me, maybe it would be interesting to them.
Yeah. Yeah, I think questions are powerful. I think about, as a parent, I've got 3 kids. My oldest 2 don't ask the question as much anymore, but my youngest, still every day, it's the age-old question, why? So it's always why. It could be anything. Why, Dad? Why, Dad? And sometimes we get frustrated with that, right? But it is kind of an interesting approach to studying the Word of God, of asking questions. Wait, you said this morning, you'd looked it up. How many? It was 100 and something questions that.
So he was asked in the Gospels 307 questions. Yeah. He personally asked 108. No, he asked 307 questions. Right. So he's a big question answer. Yeah. He was asked 183 questions, and he answered 3 of them.
Yeah, that's right.
So
we don't have to know all the answers. Right, we just have to be good at asking questions.
At the end of the day, if Jesus didn't have the answer or didn't provide the answer, then I think it should not be. We're not Bible answer men.
Yeah, that's right.
We just need to be asking good questions, and there is absolute truth in the Bible, and then there's a lot that we don't know.
Right.
And so I think so many times we can read into a passage what we want it to say, but that doesn't mean that that's unequivocally what he was actually saying.
Yeah. Well, one thing that you've made note of, both in your sermon yesterday and in kind of some follow up conversations, was how interesting it was, and even out of character it was, when Jesus is asked the question. Well, I should say he answers the question. No, you're tax exempt. But then he says, but so that no one is offended.
Mm.
And that was out of character for Jesus, because if you look all throughout the Gospels, like, he didn't really care about offending anyone. I mean, in fact, sometimes the things he did, he probably was prepared for it to offend somebody. But here was it a little bit different of a case, right? Why do you think that was?
Well, and that's where, conjecture. So, you know, throughout the book of John, he constantly, and he was telling them constantly, don't tell anybody what just happened. And the reason, if you look in the Gospel of John, it will constantly say it was not yet his time.
Right.
And so I think the easy answer is he didn't want to cause offense in this moment because it was not yet his time. I did not find that to be a sufficient answer, because in Matthew chapter 10, in the temple, he healed the guy with the withered hand on the Sabbath. Created there were all sorts of problems with what he did there in Matthew 10. Now, was this a different audience? Maybe, but I mean, they were still part of the religious elite, the religious institution that he was challenging. And so why now choose that point? And so my big answer is, I have no idea. And I think this is one of those areas where we can read into, here are some options. And really the only thing that I can look at and say, well, he was clearly wanting to teach Peter something, and I made this point yesterday. He did not see this a hill worth dying on. And just parenthetically, I think the Christian community today, the Western church, has a lot of hills that they're dying on. And we tend to be more about what we're against than what we're for. And I said it yesterday, but if everything's an A priority, nothing's an A priority.
That's right.
And so we have to pick and choose the things that are gospel centric. And so I look at this. So maybe it was like, hey, I want to keep the line of communication going where this is concerned. So this is not a hill I'm going to die on. So we'll provide the tax. In fact, I'm going to provide the tax in the weirdest possible way.
He didn't reach into his pocket and pull any change out. He
didn't do the grandfatherly, hey, look, it was in your ear.
No, it was in the mouth of a fish.
Yeah, which makes no sense. But then again, it's Jesus.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And that kind of leads to this next idea that, Jesus paying that tax on their behalf is a great story. But at least to me, seems to parallel something bigger, right? What do you think about that?
Yeah, so he says, you're going to find this 4 drachma coin, and it will pay my tax and yours. So there is an underlying implication there that Jesus is paying for Peter's tax. And so if we take that to the bigger implication, it's Jesus is paying, because if you look back in Nehemiah, part of what the temple upkeep it was for the atonement offerings. And so I found that fascinating, that here it's talking about the temple taxes for the atonement offerings. And now Jesus will be the ultimate atonement offering. And so he's paying both for his temple tax, but he's also paying for Peter's, and ultimately he's going to pay for the world.
That's right.
Yeah, and so I think when you look at the grander scale of this, basically he's saying, hey, listen, I'm paying your fees.
That's right.
I'm paying it all.
Well, and you said it earlier, right? He tells us in the gospel, Jesus doesn't come to abolish the law; he comes to fulfill the law and the prophets, right? And so essentially, that's the story of atonement, right? And he's saying, like, hey, it's been prophesied for years, centuries, like, hey, there's going to come one day this Savior of the world. And we were talking about it earlier before we started that there was this assumption that this Savior of the world was going to come in some glorious, dramatic way, and yet in Mark chapter 11 we see this triumphant entry. That generally that term is reserved for a Roman general that would be coming in off of a victorious battle, riding on this war horse stallion.
And the
And
rose petals are coming
yeah,
down,
and
all like Gladiator.
yeah, and
Yeah.
instead in Mark 11 we see it's referred to as a triumphant entry, but instead Jesus tells his to say, like, hey, go get the colt that's tied up. It's going to be nothing special. Jesus, even all the way back to his birth, came in an unexpected way. Like, he came as an infant. They expected this big time warrior to come in, and instead he came as a baby and kind of lived among us, for 30 years before his ministry, and even to all the way to the end, he's always doing kind of the unexpected. And this story, I think, is another example of that. Like, it could have just ended with, no, you're exempt. But instead, I think there is a greater message there of like, hey, no, I'm here to do more. Like, I'm going to pay this tax, and eventually it's going to parallel to this idea that I'm paying for the sins of the world, right? So that kind of leads us to maybe somewhat narrow in and land the plane a little bit. So towards the end of your message yesterday, you specifically challenged those who were there and those who were listening with kind of two things. One was the group of people who maybe haven't said yes to rending their hearts to Jesus, right? In fact, we learned this morning there was 4 people yesterday that accepted Jesus and said, hey, listen, I'm rending my heart. Come in, do what you want to do. I'm making room, right? So that was group 1, but the other group was this group that maybe like Peter, like yesterday was a revelation of like, oh wait, like Jesus he's trying to teach me something, or maybe he's trying to lead me to something. And so you kind of pitched this idea of like, we've all got this next step. Like, what is this next thing for you? What is it that you're butting up against that you're maybe a little fearful of doing, or something that the Lord is calling you to, but you're like, I don't know about that yet. Kind of maybe walk us through your thought process, why that challenge was so heavy on you yesterday.
Well, so again, if we're tracking Peter's experience with Jesus, hey, Jesus, if it's you, command me to get out of the boat in the middle of a storm. And he gets out of the boat and he walks on water. And so his faith allows him to experience, the extraordinary.
That's right.
Well, here, what does he say? So we may not cause offense. Go to the lake and throw out your line. So he's telling a fisherman to go fish, right? And he had told Peter early on in his ministry that I'm going to make you fishers of men.
Right.
But now he's literally saying, go to the lake. So the Sea of Galilee is twice the size of Lake Conroe. So imagine the tens of thousands of fish that are in Lake Conroe. So double that, and now you've got the Sea of Galilee. So throw your line in the Sea of Galilee, and of all of the fish, the first fish you catch, open his mouth, and there's going to be enough to pay my temple tax and yours.
And he's a fisherman, so it's not, he's caught thousands of fish in his life before, and never once has he pulled money out of one.
Right.
So
it's just not commonplace that this is going to happen. And so in my mind, Jesus is inviting him again into an experience where, hey, it's going to be my power that's going to get this done. And I think it's a little tongue in cheek. Hey, watch what I'm about to do.
Yeah.
This is going to be fun. Here's a little supernatural treasure hunt. Head out there, do this. Bring it back and show me when you got it done. And so at the end of the day, what is God, what is Jesus asking you to do? Where is the question for you? Hey, are you willing to throw your line out? Because I have something for you. Are you willing to step out of the boat? And for all of us, there is that moment. It's the moment of faith. And whether it takes this much faith or this much faith, there is an element of faith to do the thing that God's calling you to do in order to experience what he wants you to experience. And just in all of the conversations that I have throughout the week and throughout the year, I run up against people who know what God's called them to do, but just have not taken the steps to actually do it. And so I said, hey, let me simplify it all for you. Here's the spiritual life in a nutshell. Listen to the voice of God. Do what he tells you to do.
That's right. That's it.
And so I don't even know that we have a hearing problem. I think we have an obedience problem.
That's good.
Because to listen, really kind of listen and obey are they're interrelated. They're cousins. I can hear you and ignore you.
Right.
But if
Oh,
I'm
my
really,
kids do it all the time.
yeah,
So it's
if I'm really listening, I've got to make the choice. Hey, so I'm really taking it in, and so now what do I do with it? And so, yeah, I think for all of us, this is the life we're called to live.
Yeah.
It's the life that He's inviting us into, and so I say this a lot. But if you're bored in your relationship with Jesus, just know He's bored too.
yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Because he's in for the adventure.
Yeah.
He wants you to go throw your line out.
Yeah.
Because he wants to give you a fish with some money in it.
Yeah.
So I would challenge everyone, head out to Lake Conroe this afternoon.
That's right. Yeah.
Catch some fish. If you got some money, just tithe off of it.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. Yeah.
At least give us a temple tax.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, yeah, that's a good word. The idea that we don't have a hearing problem, that we have an obedience problem. It's. I'll tell my wife that the next time she says, "Are you listening to me?" I'm like, I'm listening. I'm just not obeying. It's
Yeah, take that out.
Yeah.
Let me know how that works.
That's
for
right.
you.
Yeah, we'll.
Alexis, if you're listening to this, I'm so sorry he said that.
I might be in the next 2020 episode. We'll see. So well, we'll kind of land it there. This idea. I think there's kind of two takeaways. One, just kind of going back to what you said earlier about studying the Word. I think it was so practical. This idea of setting a timer and just asking as many questions as you can about a passage, whether that's in your quiet time or just maybe it's a follow up to Sunday's sermon where you're like, man, I'm just going to sit in that passage that you talked about yesterday or 2 weeks ago or whenever it might have been. I'm just going to start asking questions. And I know that our pastoral staff, everyone on our team, including yourself, would love to make ourselves available. If you come across a question that you just can't find the answer to, let's talk about it. I think that'd be really great. So that's one takeaway. But this other takeaway is this idea of, butting up against what is it that God is calling us to? What is our next step? What is that encounter that the Lord is calling us to? And then I think the question we have to ask is, why haven't we taken it yet? Right? We have friends. We have people in our circle that we've been walking this exact story with them for months, where they're sitting at the cusp of a next step, but there's a handful of things that just keep them from it. Well, ask that question this week. What is it that's holding me back? Is it fear? Right? Is it uncertainty? Is it security? I mean, there's a variety of different reasons why we don't take next steps.
Is it selfishness?
So yeah, greed,
I mean,
pride.
yeah,
Let's just keep going, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are all the basics. Fear keeps us from a lot, but really, and Sam said it in his message last week, that a lot of times we think of Jesus versus evil, but it's actually Jesus versus self.
Yeah, that's right.
And so we're always moving towards self, and so it takes real Holy Spirit focus to stay focused on Jesus.
Yeah, that's right. Well, we'll land it there. What's your next step, and what's keeping you from taking it? So, thank you. This is episode 11, Afterthought, and we'll see you next week. Sam will be back. So,
yeah.
you won't
Hey,
have to.
you know what? Hey, Sam, I think we got a keeper here. Yeah.
We'll
hey,
see.
Hey, Taylor, thanks for jumping in today.
Yeah. Thank you for the opportunity. It's awesome.
Hey, we'll see you next week. God bless.
Yeah, we'll see you.